Okay, because on the form, I just saw recall in terms of what.
That's something else. Like those are the two things that
I
she
gotcha.
needs.
Okay, so we have leash reactivity towards dogs. We have scared of a lot of things.
Yeah, she's kind of scared of toddlers.
Okay.
Like we have a
Is
niece.
she around them regularly?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are older, but we have nieces and nephews, and she'll just like hide.
I see. How is she with your kids?
She's fine.
She's fine.
Yeah.
She grew up with them?
I mean, yeah, she's only a year, but yeah, she grew up with them.
Okay, so you got her at 2 months?
We got her at like 5 months,
At 5
4
months,
months, something
okay.
like that.
And how old are your children?
13 and 15.
Okay, so older children.
Yeah.
So it's really like the younger.
Yeah, it's really like the 3 to 5 set that freak her out.
I gotcha. Were they like kind of big energy, the 3 to 5-year-olds?
They're big energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
And there are a lot of touching. Like my other dog doesn't care, and they like pick her up or try to. She's too heavy for them, but she tolerates it. But Billie is just terrified.
What breed is your other dog?
She's also an Aussie.
Also an Aussie, but like a standard size Aussie or?
Nope, they're both the same size.
Okay. And how old
She's
is...
older. She's 5.
She's 5.
But she's always been chill.
I gotcha. And so we have a 5-year-old Aussie, and then we have the 1-year-old Aussie. And then what else?
That's it. 2 kids.
2 kids.
2 kids, 2 dogs is more than enough.
I used to have 5 dogs at one point. So.
Okay, well.
And we have our first coming in end of July. So.
Kid? Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations. That's really
Thank you.
exciting.
Yeah, I got baby boy on the way. Anything else that you're looking to accomplish or that you're wanting to achieve with Billie?
I mean, really just like having her feel less stressed by other dogs.
Okay.
Like, you know, I don't want her to freak out every time and bark and whatever. She's okay at like dog parks or places where she's off leash. She'll kind of just like hover around my foot. I mean, she's still scared. She's not particularly like, our other dog just runs and plays.
Yeah.
She's not like that, but she's not aggressive. When she's on leash, she like is aggressive.
Sure. Okay. We'll explain it. We'll talk about that too. So you're capable of taking her to like a social setting with dogs if she's off leash, but she won't socialize.
She doesn't interact. Yes.
She just stays with you.
She does. She does this move.
What happens if you're at the park and a dog comes into your space?
She'll hide.
Okay, but she won't become reactive. Okay, but if she's on the leash.
She hasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if she's on the leash, she will become reactive.
Yes.
Gotcha. Anything else?
The recall, like she knows her name. She can sit. She can stay. Not when dogs are present, obviously, like when we're on the leash. I feel like none of those things really work when she's on leash and there's dogs present. But like at home and whatnot, she can sit and stay.
Sure.
She does not. She will come sometimes if you're calling her. But like if the neighbor dog's out back, even though they can't interact really, they'll bark across the fence. She won't call when I call her.
Okay, gotcha. So we have recall, we have the reactivity.
Like barking at the neighbor dog through the fence.
Okay.
The other dog is really yippy and just barks all day.
Okay.
So that, I don't know if that's something I'm going to be able to.
There's things you can do.
Yeah.
Like we can control it. We can definitely lessen it.
Okay.
But like if you were to leave her out by herself, you know, in the yard for like an hour or whatever, dogs get bored. Plus there's no one there to like tell them what to not do, you know, that they'll usually resort to old habits. But if you happen to be present or what have you, like shoot.
Yeah, if I stand between her and the fence, she won't bark. But if I'm not out there, she will bark.
Yeah. Okay. Are you looking to try to take her to restaurants and stuff, or is it just like you really want to address the reactivity and the recall type stuff?
I mean, yeah, I'm looking to have her. I feel like summer here, it's just like there's dogs everywhere. And not feeling like I have to cross the street or pick her up. If I pick her up, she won't bark. She doesn't do anything. She just sits there and shakes. But yeah, it would be nice. I don't know if she needs to go to restaurants. I don't know if I'm looking to take 2 dogs and 2 kids to a restaurant.
Yeah.
But I would like her to feel comfortable when we go to like the farmer's market or something.
I gotcha. Okay. And then did you just find us with like a standard Google?
No, actually, a friend of a friend sent their dog here.
Okay. Do you happen to know the dog's name?
I don't
No,
know.
it's
It's a
okay.
pit
Yeah.
mix.
Okay.
The friend that I have, she doesn't have any pets,
I see.
but she's really good friends with this couple.
Gotcha. Okay. So before like booking this, did you read up on us and how we approach training, the methods that we use and things?
I did.
Okay. So I'll explain everything.
Great.
And then give you an idea of what to expect.
Okay.
And then like what I would suggest for length of time.
Okay.
So my specialty is behavioral. Okay, it's my niche.
Yeah.
Aggression, fear, anxiety, nervousness, overstimulation. That's what I've built my career on. And we train with with a tool. It's called the e-collar or with remote collar. Okay, more commonly known as like a shock collar.
Okay.
Shock comes from a couple of different fronts. One, when e-collars were first developed, they had like 3 to 5 settings, right? Low, medium, high. So the jump between the settings was greater because of the technology at the time, whereas now we have 127 settings. Okay. So it doesn't mean we have 124 settings more, higher.
No, it's just
More variance.
Yeah.
Yes. So we can really fine tune to the dog, to the personality type, to the temperament, to the situation, all that stuff. Okay, so it's much more refined now. Also, in dog training, the most commonly practiced theory is positive reinforcement training, which is clicker, treats, praise, which we use. We have a puppy. One of my trainers here just wrapped up a puppy head start, which is all clicker, positive reinforcement stuff.
Yeah.
Real simple foundational stuff.
Yeah, that's what we did with Bill or Roxy, our other dog.
Sure, yeah. And it's great for puppies, but at a certain point, most people come across a time when they need big boy, big girl training, and that's where like tools like remote collar come into play. So in the positive only world, aversives and punishers are looked down upon, and they use terms like shock, pain, torture to deter their clients or the people that follow them from using these tools. Okay, dogs are physical creatures. They nip and bite each other. As a form of correction.
They play for fun all day. They're
Yep.
very entertaining.
Yes, they do it for play, they do it for affection. It's just how they communicate with each other. So I like to refer to the e-collar as a bite on the button. When conditioned correctly, the dog will start to perceive it as a nip or a bite, which is now gives us a line of communication. Okay, so most people think when we're dealing with like reactivity, I'll come in, we'll put a collar on the dog, and then we instigate the dog to be bad, and then you just punish the behavior. That's technically an approach, but it's like one of the like last resorts that we have. The first thing that we always cover is teaching a dog how to walk correctly on a leash, so which is called the heel command. So I had a client, the one I just came from at the park. Their dog is super reactive. Like as the owner described it, it was a prison for the dog because they couldn't take it anywhere. Even in their own home, the dog would bark at like another dog barking outside, and it's incessant, right?
Okay.
So it's getting pretty frustrating for them. So when they came for the first class, they're just like, we want to target the barking. And I go, I understand that, but there's a process.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with this today, and we're going to see what happens.
Yeah.
So I didn't see them for 2 weeks because I ended up going out of town, and I saw them today for their second class. And I was like, how'd it go? And the guy was like, it's been amazing. Like a complete 180. And I go, yes. I was like, because the human is seeing the barking as the problem, but it's the symptom of the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I mean, she's definitely anxious.
sure. Like, so like the reactivity, right? And then you said she's scared of everything. So the reactivity is really coming from the fear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
So that the fear is actually the root of the problem. The reactivity is a symptom of the problem.
Sure.
Okay. So when we do the heel exercise, I know it can seem not related to what we're doing, right? But when you start to discipline the dog and teach them what is not an option, it tends to calm them down, okay?
Sure.
And we're theoretically making her more concerned about you than she is about the environment, okay? So if we do get a dog that is scared of environmental stuff, right? We need something to get them, when they're outside, to override their own personal fear so that they can navigate the world, but then eventually they navigate through the world without practicing the fear, that they realize they don't need to be scared. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So the e-collar is a physical consequence. It's a muscle contraction. Have you ever been to a chiropractor or physical therapist?
No.
Have you ever heard of a TENS unit? Have you ever seen where they recreate labor contraction pains in men? No? Okay. So it's simply a muscle stimulator. They use it a
Okay.
lot in chiropractic offices.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a commercial where they have the machine that moves the ab or the stomach
Sure,
muscles?
I've definitely seen like the Instagram things where they're like, you can get abs in 5 minutes by just wearing this.
Yes. It's the same technology.
Okay.
Okay. So that, more simply put, is what's called a TENS unit, TENS, and it stands for something.
Okay.
But it's a electric, but not electricity. So
Okay.
like, your muscles and everything, it's all electrical signals, right?
Sure.
So when you put that machine on your stomach, it's contracting the abs and working them out to develop the ab muscles, right? It's the same technology for the collar.
Okay.
So it's not electricity running through the dog.
Yeah.
There's contact, and you'll see the muscle move where the collar is making contact. So if I put the collar in my hand, you would probably see my thumb move like this, because it's moving this muscle, which then moves this finger, okay? So where the two probes make contact is what it's going to stimulate, okay?
Okay.
So we do heel first because we need to condition the dog. I want them to perceive it as a dog bite or a nip,
Okay.
but it's unnatural because they're not meant to have their muscles contracted. That's human technology.
Yep.
So we use the heel because, one, leash pulling and leash reactivity are the most common things that we come across.
Yep.
Okay, and heel actually helps address both of those things. Most people in the city of Chicago will walk their dog 3 times a day because most people don't have yards, right? So it's 3 times a day, 7 days a week that they're practicing this exercise. So the dog gets plenty of exposure, plenty of practice. So then within the week, they have an understanding of how it turns on and then how it turns off. Okay. So we're using it more as a line of communication, teaching the dog how to block out the environment and essentially focus on the owner. And then we see, what does that fix?
Okay.
So behavior and obedience are 2 different things, and this might get a little confusing because I just explained obedience to fix the problem, but the obedience isn't fixing the problem. It's the discipline behind the obedience. It's the consequence.
Okay.
Okay, so most obedience is if the dog sits, I give a treat.
Sure.
Right? So that's a positive consequence. But if the dog does not sit, there is no negative consequence to teach the dog you don't want to ignore the command. That's what's missing.
You're not getting food, but you're not. Nothing's happening.
Yeah, the dog's not like, oh man, I really missed out on that opportunity, like a kid would.
Yeah.
Like growing up, like
Here's the candy.
Exactly. Or like, no video games for a week. You're not going to see your friends for a week, right? Getting grounded, all that. Like, we understand when things are withdrawn from us, like that doesn't feel good, right? So that could be a punisher, but we're self-aware. Dogs are not.
Yeah.
So if a dog gets too close to her, and it's a she, right?
Yep.
Too close to her, and another dog, while she's on leash, comes into this personal space, and you see that reactivity, right? That's the threat of, I might bite you. Stay away from me.
Yeah.
Right? Or it could actually be, boom, you're too close to me. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So she's using that physical touch to establish the boundary. Whether or not it's healthy or unhealthy is a separate thing.
Yeah.
Right? But essentially, that's what the collar allows us to do.
Okay.
So we have emotional stressors and physical stressors. When you go out on a walk and she sees a dog on leash, that's an emotional stressor, right? She starts to become scared, and she's like, I don't want the dog to come closer. I perceive threat, so I'm going to bluff potentially and act aggressive to spook the dog away, right? The physical stressor would be the e-collar. Okay, it's something that she feels, and that's concrete. So now the dog has to do comparison, or like the dog math. What's more stressful? How I feel about the dog across the street, or how I feel about the collar that's going to turn on? And then the dog makes choices accordingly. Okay, and then over time, the dog starts to learn, oh, well, I didn't blow up at the dog. Nothing happened here, right? Also, nothing happened here. So I guess I don't need to be reactive. And then they start to understand and be able to exist in the world without having to always be reactive when they see a trigger. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, but we always start with the heel exercise. It's usually two classes. There's the first class, which is the foundation. I give you your homework, rinse and repeat. Okay. You come back a week later, you give me feedback, right?
Okay.
You might say she's 50% better, 10% better. Sometimes, like with this last client, they only had 1 moment of reactivity in 2 weeks. Whereas before it was all day, every walk, right? So that was a huge, like 99% turnaround. Every case is different. I don't know what it's going to be, but your feedback helps me go, okay, this is what I need to tweak. We make some adjustments. We work on the second part of heal, go off, rinse, and repeat. Okay. You come back class 3, you give me more feedback. Every now and then I'll get a case that's more difficult than most, and we'll have to have like a dedicated class where we're actively working on the reactivity. Okay.
Okay.
So if it's not addressed in the first 2 classes, then by the 3rd class, I go, okay, the first 2 either helped minimize how much reactivity we're having, and we're dealing with just the residual. And in some cases, and it's rare, it's like it's doing nothing. I go, no problem, because you still have to do the foundation anyways, right? That has to happen regardless. And then I go, today we're going to figure it out. And then I'll tell the owner, rinse and repeat. Okay. Now, if it's a case that I think it's going to be very difficult, typically by the 3rd class, if we've dedicated it to reactivity, as I'll tell them, don't come back to class 4 until we've got it done. Okay. So what they'll typically do is they'll email me. I'll tell them, email me in a week, give me feedback, and they'll email me. And then they might say, hey, Jesse, there's a lot of improvement, but I'm still struggling here and here. I go, okay, you're going to do this in those moments. And I'll email it to them. They'll go off and they'll do it again for another week. And then they'll give me feedback, right? And eventually they'll go, hey, Jesse, it's been 2 weeks with no reactivity. And they'll, great, come back for class 4 now. Okay?
Okay.
Once you understand how it works, it's literally just going out and addressing it until eventually you get a period of time where you don't see it at all. Okay?
Okay.
So
this is kind of a side note, but with the toddlers, we don't see them very often.
right.
How does that one?
That would be, that's a separate thing. So when she sees the toddlers, is she trying to run away, or is she also being reactive?
She'll growl and hide.
Okay. So once you understand how to correct behavior, because it's the same consequence for a multitude of things. So growing up, I was raised old school. I was spanked. Okay. If I didn't do my chores, I got spanked. If I didn't get straight A's, I got spanked. If I talked back, I got spanked. Right? It was one consequence for all these things.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I'm like a very disciplined person. And I credit it to me being such a very good dog trainer, because it's like literally the same concepts, right? Is once I teach you and we review, this is how we address behaviors we don't want. You already know how to do it. You just now need to apply. Now, the difference would be for dogs on the street, I don't care that she likes the dogs. I just care that she's not reactive.
Yeah.
Okay. With the toddlers, we care that she likes them.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if it's like children of friends or family.
Yeah.
Kids she would see regularly.
Yes. Like once a month.
Yes. So we can correct the growling. We can technically correct the running away. But then the next part is you would technically have to press her comfort zone and socialize her with the children to start building a relationship.
Okay.
Okay. So one solution is she's around kids, they don't interact, but I don't allow her to act out or hide. Okay.
Okay.
That just lets her coexist, but we never press the threshold. Okay. And could she get over it in time? Possibly. But we're not actively working on it. Okay. The other approach is we do the same thing. We correct what we don't want. We don't allow her to run, so she learns to just be in the social context. But then we also press interaction with the children so that, let's say she were to act out, we would correct it, but then also pair it with positive, because now we're teaching her, if you do this behavior, consequence. If you don't do the behavior, no consequence, and then positive things happen.
Okay.
Okay, because we do care about, we do want the dog to, acclimate to the child.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's really personal preference. That takes more time because we're trying to change how she feels about something.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? The reactivity is always easy because I don't care how she feels.
Yeah.
I just need her not to bark at them.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're on the same page of like, yeah, kids, we just need her to just be behaved, and we can, tell the kids to give her space and they can go to the other dog, then you're good.
Okay.
But if it's like, if in the future she's going to be around more kids and stuff like that, then it may be beneficial to press her boundary or her comfort zone to get her to open up. Now, there's never a guarantee that you can get the dog to like something.
Yeah.
So, like for me, like 15 years ago, I didn't like sushi. That was gross.
Yeah.
Okay, raw fish, ew. And then I had a buddy of mine who took me to a sushi place.
Constantly pressuring you to eat it.
Peer pressure, right?
Yeah.
He was like, try the Godzilla roll. He's like, it's cooked. It's really good, right?
Yeah.
I tried the Godzilla roll, and it's like my favorite roll to this day, right? But now I like nigiri, sashimi, uni. Like,
Yeah.
I just love sushi now. But I had an experience, and it changed my mind. But I'm the one ultimately that made the decision of I love sushi now, right?
Okay.
Because there's things in my life that I don't like, and I've tried, and I still don't like them, right?
Sure.
So for the dog, I always tell people like, we can do things for sure.
And the kids are going to grow, so.
Yes. The other thing we take into account is energy. That's why I said, are the kids big energy? You're like, oh yeah, they're big energy, right? Is nervous dogs and fearful dogs tend not to like loud, big, boisterous energy.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Now they can learn to tolerate for sure. But though when I see that, I'll tell people right off the bat, I'm like, this most likely is not going to ever click.
Yeah.
But it's funny because sometimes the owners themselves will be boisterous energy, but the dog will tolerate and accept them.
Yeah,
but
our son is big energy, but he's a big guy. You know, like they'll all play like basketball or something in the backyard. Sure. Mm-hmm. The dogs are fine with that, but something about the toddlers grabbing at them and...
It's normal because kids at that age tend to be more erratic. They're not as coordinated.
And they really do try to like pull and grab.
And those are things we take into account as well. Yeah. Every dog has a limitation, right? And there are dogs that are tolerant and stuff, but I've also heard throughout the years, like where a client was like, oh, my dog's super tolerant, and then all of a sudden nip my kid in the face. I go, right, because if it's been happening for day after day, the dog's like, okay, today I've had enough.
Yeah, or right? You don't seem to be learning my boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are things we also want to take into account as well, because dogs are living, breathing creatures.
Yeah, they want their personal space.
Right. There's boundaries there too. So that's why it's always up to the humans to establish boundaries, both from dog to child, but then child to dog as well. And that's really what helps mitigate a lot of risk for anything.
Yeah.
Okay. And I explain all this stuff because so it's like partial dog training, right? Like heel and all that stuff.
Sure.
But also understanding your dog.
Yeah.
I get a lot of clients who are used to getting what they want. You can tell they're higher ups, or they're like,
Well, maybe they don't have kids, because I feel like if you've got 2 kids or any kind of kids, the chance of you getting what you want all the time is slim.
Yes, right. But that's just reality.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I tell them stuff like that's not realistic, they're like looking like, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and I explain it to them, and they're like, I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, we'll get through it, right? But yeah, I find a balance of, you have what you need and want, your dog has what they need and want, and I'm a compromise.
Okay.
Okay. And that's what I feel like leads to the most success. It's not that I'm not for pushing dogs, because I am. If my ceiling's up here, if I don't push for up here, we're not going to get even close.
Yeah.
Right. Usually people tend to be down here because they're not aware of what good training is actually capable of. So like that's why I asked about going to a restaurant. I get clients that would love to, but they can't because of their dog. Or I get clients that would love to have people over, but they can't because of their dog. Right.
Yeah.
So when I tell them, like, no, all this stuff is perfectly possible if you want it. But I have to know, because that tells me how long I'm going to need in order to turn the case around.
Sure.
Okay. Any questions about this stuff?
Not right now.
Okay. So in terms of length of time, I'd probably put you at about 6 classes. Okay. 6 classes is once a week for an hour. Okay. Which doesn't seem like much, but it's pretty straightforward. Okay. 2 classes on heel, because it has to happen.
Yep.
A 3rd class on reactivity, and that would be a variable. That's if you need it.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would cover recall.
Okay.
So I try to get recall in as quickly as possible, because it takes
Sure.
the longest to achieve
Yep.
to be off-leash reliable.
Yep.
And then so that's 4 classes, and think of classes 5 and 6 as a variable. Okay.
Okay.
Class number 5 could be, wow, we're making a lot of progress with the reactivity stuff. You're feeling confident, and maybe you want to work on what do I do with my dog around toddlers?
Sure.
Right. So that technically gives us 2 classes to work on the kid thing. And it's really time. So like once I've covered a behavior, like this is how you socialize your dog with children, it's a matter of just doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if she's going to be around toddlers once a month, realistically speaking, it may not be worth covering.
Yeah.
At least not the pushing, like, the actual socialization stuff. But if you think in the future she may come up where it's like she's going to be around kids all the time, then obviously like it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think it's like I would like her to feel like she's not growling, but for her to be friends with them while they're in this age, I'm fine with that.
Sure, yeah.
Passing.
And what's probably going to happen is when they turn 9 or 10 or whatever, she's going to be completely fine with them.
Yes.
Because they're behaving normally. That's usually how that stuff works.
Exactly.
Okay? So then what I would probably suggest we cover is place, which is stationary control. And it's what you can use when she's around toddlers and you don't want to have to worry about her.
Okay.
Okay, so like that right there, that dog bed, is what we call place. So like if a client sends their dog to place, when guests come over and the guests are there for 3 hours and the client decides to keep the dog there for 3 hours, that's what the dog is doing for 3 hours.
Okay.
Okay. So it's like, okay, we're going to be around kids. I place her here. Kids are being kids over there. We tell them, give her space. We know she's not going to move, and we know the kids are going to give her space, and then that's the balance.
Okay.
Okay. And then the 6th class would be if you need to review anything, if you need to recap anything, or if you're like, hey, can we learn something else? You know, if I can get it done with the class, I really don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say at least 6 classes. The recall, if I get it in by class 3, we're kind of touching upon it, because once you know how to do it, it's just a matter of doing
Practicing.
it. Okay. Recall can take around 6-ish months to get off leash reliable.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you need time and repetition.
Our other dog is, but I would never take her off right now. We're not at that place.
Sure. So, because I had another client where I trained her first dog, and she came back and I trained her second dog, and then she told me her first dog took her about 6 months, and I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good timeline, because you have the weather, right? You have obviously 2 kids.
Yeah.
You know, life happens, work happens. Maybe you're intending to go to the park one day, and then all of a sudden it's just rained out.
Yep.
Right? That's why recall takes so long.
Yep.
So once you understand it, it's just you do it, and it's really intuitive. Where one day you're like, she's awesome. Like I don't need this leash anymore, and you progress towards off leash. And I've also had clients in the past where they'll do everything they need to. We'll get to like the 5th class, and then they'll decide to pocket the 6th class. Okay. And they might come back the following year.
Okay.
And then they'll go, hey, Jesse, this is where we're at. And then I'll help them clean up anything, because sometimes they misremember, or they'll sometimes do things I tell them not to do. And
Well,
then they...
I would say that's been the biggest issue with her versus the first dog. It's like the kids, it's like you tell the dogs to do something. And because she was a puppy, it's like the kids are like, don't... I'm like, you know, sit and stay when we come in, or just like keep her from jumping on us. But the kids are like, hey.
Yeah.
So she's getting big time mixed messages.
Yeah. And like dogs will learn like, okay, mom and dad, I got to behave myself. And the kids like, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
If you wanted to correct it, we could correct it. I always tell everybody, it's your dog, your rules. There's certain things where I'm like, we have to do this if we're trying to fix the problem. And there's, you know, I get clients who are like, but I like it when my dog jumps on me. I'm like, that's fine. I'm like, then don't correct it.
Yeah.
You know, you can have that. But I get other clients who are like, I don't want my dog to ever jump on me. All right, let me correct it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about that stuff?
So with the classes, it's like you pay for a package of 6. Is
Correct.
that okay?
Yes. So we do 3, 6, 9, and 12.
Okay.
Okay. The only time I do one-off classes is if I've already worked with the client before.
Okay.
Okay. Because I cannot teach the foundation, like the minimum I can do a completely blank dog with remote collars, 3 classes.
Sure.
Because it gives us enough to make sure all the conditioning is done so that the dog understands it correctly. Otherwise, if I just do 1 class, a lot of times people misremember things, and then they leave and they're doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
You know, because I'll have it where I'll work with the client, I'll see them in the next class, and everything they did the first week was wrong, and I'll have to correct it.
Yeah.
So that's why we need at least a minimum 3. For your particular case, I'm suggesting 6 because we have the reactivity. So it's the 2 on heel, 1 on reactivity, 1 on recall, 1 on place for the kid stuff, and then the 6 would be like, if you wanted to recap, save it for the future, whatever, and then or teach something else. Like it's completely up to you.
Okay.
So it's 1 day a week for an hour. They're private classes. All I do is one-on-one. So you don't have to worry about being with like 5 other people and then not having your personal needs being met.
Sure.
So I mentioned earlier we train out of the park. So I actually train out of Aussie Park.
Okay.
So are you in the West Loop?
No, I'm on like Damon and Grand.
Okay, so you're just up right, like northeast a little bit. I gotcha. So where we train technically doesn't matter. Okay.
Okay.
So like my client that I said his dog there was super reactive. Their main concern was if we weren't training at the park, was it still going to address the reactivity?
Sure.
Okay. And I told him it wasn't going to matter.
Okay.
So we had the first class here.
Okay.
And then I saw them today for the second class. And like I said, he said it was amazing. They had one instance of reactivity in 2 weeks, right? Because of how I train.
Sure.
You learn to adapt the methods
To
the
whatever the
environment.
situation
Yes.
is.
Yes, you have to learn, you have to understand how to kind of go with the flow in order to be successful.
Sure.
Because if you only understand it in certain contexts, like you're gonna be stuck. Okay, so I try to teach people to think like me. What makes me a really good dog trainer is I've seen pretty much everything there is to see with dogs. I've dealt with some really highly aggressive dogs and stuff like that, where things go wrong, and then it's like, uh-oh, and you got to fix
Yeah.
it in the moment. But being able to think on your feet is really what's the greatest part of training. Most people think of training as like, I tell my dog to sit, and they sit. I tell my dog to come, and they come, which is true. But what happens if you're at the park, Billie is off leash, and a kid in the middle of October blows up a firework, and she takes off for her life?
Yeah.
Right? That has happened to clients.
Yeah.
I've had at least, I would say, 10 clients in 15 years of training dogs tell me they've been at the park and a random firework gets blown up and it spooks the dog.
Yeah.
And they're able to return their dog because they understand how to think on the fly
Yep.
and use the tool that they have. So that's the, yes, there's training and obedience for your 99.9% of life, but it's that 0.01% of life when things go south where you have to kind of think on the fly so that you don't risk losing your dog or what have you.
Yeah.
Okay? So I cover all that stuff. Question on any of that.
I don't think so.
So, very common question that we get is when does the e-collar go away?
Okay.
Okay. In my opinion, when you need it, it doesn't. So what that means is every time you go for a walk, you'd have the collar on.
Sure.
If she's going to be off leash, you have the collar on.
Yep.
If she's a great dog inside the house, you don't need it.
Yep.
You're going to go over to your friend's house, they have toddlers, you put the collar on.
Sure.
Okay. You drive?
Yep.
Do you ever go on the expressway?
Yeah.
Do you go the speed limit?
Most of the time.
Okay, so you're a rule follower.
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Most people don't go the speed limit.
Yeah.
Right? And they see a squad car and what happens?
Slow down.
Yes.
Really fast.
And then once they pass the squad car,
Speeding
back
up.
up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We call that opportunistic behavior. Kids too. I don't know if you ever saw those like videos.
I've got one kid that is super good at that.
Yeah, right? Like, oh, if they don't see me, can
No
I
one,
get that cookie?
I'll like watch them, especially when they're younger, like look around at the scenario and
Yeah.
be like, no one's seeing me, I got this.
Opportunistic behavior.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a great example. All animals do it. Okay, it's a part of survival instinct. Okay, so like if we take a pond of fresh water and there's like an alligator, whatever the freshwater one is, right? And they know it's in the water, they won't drink. The moment they see it come out the water, they go drink. Okay, because that's opportunity. The threat is now left the pond. Same thing for dogs. So if you think of the e-collar as a cap on the collar, when it's present, she's going to behave better.
Okay.
Right? When it's not present, she might press that boundary.
Sure.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with my methods. Has nothing to do with my skills as a trainer. It's literally just opportunistic behavior.
Sure.
Okay. And I always tell people, like humans, we know better. Like we know not to go speeding on the expressway, right? Or run the red light, but people still do it, right?
Sure.
It's just opportunistic behavior.
Would you say that in general, though, that they do become, like, if you were to be somewhere and they don't have it on, do they necessarily always resort to their worst behavior? Or is there some sort of, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
has it?
It depends on the case.
Okay.
Okay. I would say more often than not, what's going to happen is, let's say you go to a friend's house with kids and you forgot the collar. And you start to see her, like, you can tell. It's like
sure.
a kid. Like, you can see it, right? And then she goes, well, I got this far. And there's no correction.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you see the act, right? So then the brain goes, oh, I did the thing I normally did before that was now being corrected, but now it wasn't corrected. And now we have a gambler.
Sure.
So it's really, if you do that consistently, so your dog is always learning. So I have had clients where they do the training and progress is super easy. Okay, it sounds great, but it can also be detrimental because since it was so easy, they're not getting like the emotional work, of like, I really busted my ass to like get to this point.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose this.
Yeah.
Because it was so fast. And then they become complacent and they become lenient because
Yeah.
they think the dog is fixed.
Yeah.
Right. And then little by little, the dog regresses. And then I get a call going, hey, Jesse, my dog's back to how they were. And then I'm like, were you being strict with the training? They're like, well, the dog was being so good, I didn't think I needed to do anymore. I go, no, your dog was being good because you were doing good with the training. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I've had other dogs. I actually have one right now. And it was funny because I wouldn't think he would have been a dog because he was difficult. But they're doing stuff without the collar. And he's been doing great.
Okay.
Right? You do get that, but it's rare.
Okay.
I always tell people, realistically speaking, I would expect when you're outside on a walk at the park or in an environment where it's like, I know my dog needs to have the collar on, it would be present, but you're not always using it.
Yeah.
It's just simply there.
It's more like that they know.
Yes. Yeah. Just like with people.
Sure.
If you put a squad car on the expressway every 100
Or one
feet,
of those signs that say your speed limit.
Yep. Right. I'm sure a lot more people would be going to speed limit. Yeah. Right. So again, it's nothing good or bad. It's just the way of the world. Also, how consistent you are is a big factor.
Yeah.
People are consistently inconsistent, is what I like to say.
Yeah, I feel like that's the hardest thing is with the two kids, getting them to follow in the consistency.
Do they walk, Billie? Okay.
Yeah.
So what you can expect there is, let's say you had them have the collar on. She would most likely learn to be more reserved, but she will experiment. Okay. Now, if they press the button even one time, that does tell Billie, oh, you will also press the button. Okay. So like, I have another client who has a son, and he's probably like 10 to 12.
Yeah.
And he did the training, and it transfers very easily. Like, that's not the hard part. The hard part is just getting them to understand the concepts, right? And then sometimes like they might feel like they're hurting the dog, right? And then we have to explain something like, no, like this is what we're doing. But as long as they press the button at the number that Billie needs, the training transfers no problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's more the consistency that I worry about with them.
Sure. Now, let's say they don't do any of the training, okay? But every time you walk her, you're consistent. She will learn that. Okay. So it's like the grandparent effect. Growing up, my grandma, I was the first grandchild. Okay, so I got spoiled a little bit from my grandma. I knew I could get away with stuff. Yeah. And the moment I picked up with my mom, it was like rules, right?
You knew who to behave for.
Yes. Dogs are the same thing. Okay. So even if your two kids are not consistent, it won't impact her behavior with you.
Sure.
And whoever else may reinforce the training, it's not going to impact them because she's going to learn like, okay, with you guys, I have to behave, but with the kids, I can press it.
Yep.
Okay. Other questions?
Not really. Not right now.
Trying to think here. More common questions. We already covered the e-collar. We covered cop and the collar stuff. So technically you'd have a couple of options. Your case is pretty straightforward. You could do in person, which is what I always recommend. In terms of investment of time, the way I do training is you train your dog as you live your life with your dog.
Sure.
Okay. Like recall, you do have to set time for it to like go to the park and stuff because it requires more in order to teach it.
Sure.
So like if you go once.
And do you use a really long lead? Is that what you work with initially? Yeah.
You use a 30-foot leash. Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So like.
Yeah, we've got one of those from camping.
Okay.
That we.
Is it like a nylon or is it a wire?
It's nylon.
It's nylon. Okay.
Yeah.
So like for recall for sure you have to set up time for like to practice the recall to train it. Otherwise, every time you walk your dog, you're applying the training.
Sure.
If we do the place command, if you're watching TV, you can do that. If you're reading a book, you can do that.
And the place command can be anything, right? Like it can be any of like a bed or something.
Correct. It could be a towel, a bed. It just has to be something to help set a perimeter. So anytime that you're stationary, once we've covered it in class, technically speaking, you could turn around and just start using it. You would just have to teach her how to sit still for a period of time.
Sure.
But that's why I tell people, if you're watching TV and doing nothing, that's the best time to do it. right? Like I'm not sitting there staring at the dog for 2 hours. Like I want to live my life with the dog, right?
Yeah.
So what she starts seeing is, oh, we're learning these things and they're being applied in life.
Sure.
Okay, and that's what makes training functional. Typically, training is you're in your living room maybe with some treats and you do some stuff for 15 minutes and you keep repeating that, and eventually, like one day, you hope it just transfers to life. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
Once you teach it, you have to begin using it. So, like we have a puppy who's doing a puppy board and train. She's with us for 3 weeks now. Even though it's just simple food, give a treat, clicker stuff. When we walk her, we're applying the training. When she comes to the door to go for a walk, she sits, we click and reward, we open the door, she stays, we click and reward, we go outside, she sits, so we lock the door, we click. Like the training, even though it's only food, is being applied on like life activities.
Yeah.
And that's what helps the dog understand, like, oh, this isn't stuff that I do just for trick or treats or whatever.
Yeah.
It's something I'm expected to do in life.
Yeah, all the time.
Correct. Okay. So it does it, and then like, because especially when I get clients like super busy, like I had a client who he was a lawyer and he would fly out like Monday morning and he wouldn't come back to like Friday evening, so he was only here for a couple of
Like
the
2
weekends.
days essentially.
And then he's like, is it even worth training my dog if I'm gone 5 days a week? I go, no. I was like, because the 2.5 days that you're here and you're consistent with all the training, that's what your dog is learning. The dog doesn't know you're gone for 5 days.
Yeah.
The dog just goes, when we're together, this is consistent. The expectations are consistent. So you still get the training done regardless.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's never a factor. If you ever have to travel and stuff, it doesn't impede on the training. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
The dog just learns, okay, I'm on a vacation. And then when you come back, rules are in play again.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about that stuff?
Nope.
How much does she weigh?
Like 31 pounds.
31 pounds? Okay. So you technically have a few options for the collar.
Okay.
The difference is output. Okay. So think of them as low, medium, medium, high, and high.
Okay.
Which is the strength of the collar.
Okay.
Low is for like 15-pound dog and under. Okay. Medium low would be like a 35-pound dog and under. Medium is like 35 to 70, and then 70 plus. Right. That's how the collars are designed. So if I put a collar meant for like a 15-pound dog on a 100-pound dog, you'd be super high and they barely feel it.
Yeah.
Okay. But because of her size, and it's really because of the reactivity. Okay. The reactivity is the variable. So size of the dog does not dictate what output they would need.
Okay.
Okay. So like I had a dog that I trained last year, which was my worst case for 23, and probably one of the worst cases I've had in 15 years. Okay. It was a 30-ish pound, 25 to 35-ish pound dog. Okay. And when I met her at the park, I heard her from like blocks away. Okay. And the lady's just walking with her dog, and the dog's going after everything, people and dogs. Okay. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be a tough one. So we're talking, and I told her, you're going to want to get the black edition, which is meant for a Rottweiler. It's meant for a 70-pound dog and over. And I said, it's perfectly safe. It's just you get more from less. I could put up my Chihuahua. It's perfectly fine. He's 8 pounds. Okay?
Yeah.
So she didn't question it. She just followed my instructions. Okay. That dog took me up until the 4th class before I finally figured out the solution for the reactivity. That dog ended up being max power on a collar meant for a Rottweiler. Okay. Once we hit that point, I told her, rinse and repeat for 2 weeks, then let me know. 2 weeks later, she scheduled her 5th class. So when I saw her on the calendar, I go, I'm assuming we got it done. We're back at the park, and she's like, nope, everything's good. No reactivity anymore. And you wouldn't think it logically, right? As a human, you're like, how does that little dog need so much pressure? She was just so overwhelmed with stress that it overrides everything else, right? Now, there's logic to this. We don't come in at 127. That's the max power. Right? Like I said, it took me up to the 4th class because we start low, and each class we're going up little by little, and she would come back and she'd be like, oh, this is great, but her reactivity is still terrible.
Yeah.
So then that's why on the 4th class I said, okay, today is the day we're going to figure it out, and then you're going to go and do it for weeks to see that it sticks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then because she did a longer program because she wanted off-leash training, we got to a point where I said, you're not going to come back for a month or two because you need time to practice everything.
Sure.
And we'd always touch upon the reactivity, and she's like, no, she's been great. because she's stuck with it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's usually the hard part that people have is, I don't assume that Billie's going to be like that, but that's usually what impacts people's progress. Is
Okay.
if we get to a point where it's like, okay, this dog needs much more than another dog would, is the owner logically tends to feel bad because they feel like they're doing something wrong because they're so high on the collar.
Yeah.
And I go, no. I'm like, that's why we start low and we work our way up. Like the dog I just came from, we were at 25 at 127. We were super low. And
Yeah.
he's about the same size as the dog I just mentioned right now.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, it's more like your sensitivities. I feel like that's with humans too.
Mm-hmm.
Some people you're like, hey, 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 you're like trying to get their attention,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a lot more
Yep.
than some people.
Yeah. And I tell people sometimes like a kid playing video games. They get so tuned in like to the video game, you tell them something, and then you come back 30 minutes later and they're like, oh, I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
So technically she falls under the 35-pound collar.
Sure.
Okay, that's the low output collar. I would recommend you at least go one step above.
Sure.
To the other one's meant for 70 and below, and that's to account for the reactivity.
Yeah,
Okay?
I think that makes sense. I mean, she's kind of a cusp anyway,
Uh-huh.
so I think that makes sense.
Okay, good. So the only difference really between the medium powered collar and then the high powered collar is the medium powered collar is a box. Okay, it looks like this.
Okay.
The higher powered collar is curved, so it looks like this.
Okay.
It's really just an aesthetics thing. Okay. If you care about your dog having a big hulking thing here, then you could go a step above that one, which is the curved collar. The difference in price is the medium powered collar is about $287-ish with tax.
Okay.
The other collar is like just around $340-ish with tax. Okay. So if you don't like I have a dog who's probably like 15, 20 pounds. He's on the medium powered collar. So he's smaller and he's got this big old thing there, but they don't care.
Okay.
That's really the biggest factor. The other thing would be if you got the high powered collar, you're really going into it going like, I don't ever have to worry about anything because this is the best collar there is.
Yeah.
But technically you have those two as an option.
Is there like a weight difference? Like, is it much heavier on her neck?
No, they're not
Okay.
the same.
Okay.
It's just aesthetically, one is curved and the other one is boxed.
Okay.
Okay. And they last for years.
Okay.
So like I had a client earlier who came in to borrow a collar.
And are they battery operated or
Yes,
are they? Okay.
rechargeable.
Okay.
Okay. So she got her collar back. We trained in 2019, and it's 5 years later. And she was like, "Oh, my remote's not holding a charge," and she thought she had to buy a new system. I said, "No, it's just you got to buy a new battery."
Okay.
So I told her how to do it. It's like $20. But I had my first round of collars for about 10 years before I actually had to replace them because they just weren't working anymore. They're fully waterproof.
Okay.
Both the receiver and the transmitter. So
Okay.
if she's ever like in the lake swimming or anything like
Sure.
that,
They like to
perfectly
do that.
fine. No problem there. So that's the most common thing. So they're an investment, but it's like you're gonna have it for a long time, so it's not
Sure.
a problem. Online, you'll find some for like $25, and then like they crap out after 2 weeks.
Makes sense.
And they're also not good quality.
Yeah.
So they're an investment, but they're good collars. They're gonna last you a long time.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions about that?
Not right now.
And Tina will send you the information.
Okay.
Because I send her an email with my recommendations, and then she follows up. I don't care.
Will it have a picture of the collars? Do
It'll
you
have the brand and the link.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
Or the model and the link. We carry them. I don't care where you get them from. I just care that you get what I recommend.
Okay.
Because I've had clients go, this one's cheaper. And then they come in, I'm like, that's not going to work for your dog.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the only thing I care about. And then if you happen to get it from us and it happens to be faulty or whatever, I can just swap it out, no problem,
Okay.
within the first 30 days.
Sure.
If something happens after that, you can send it in because you do get a 1-year warranty. And then we provide a complimentary loaner for the client if that happens until while they're getting it repaired. And then once they get it back, they just swap out or whatever. Okay. Oh yeah, so you have the option of in-person, which I recommend because
Sure.
you learn so much more.
Yep.
It's just 1 day a week for an hour, and then if you happen to be out for a couple of weeks, whatever, it's not going to impede on the training. It just gives you more time to work on stuff.
Yeah.
You could also do a daycare and train or board and train if you'd like.
Okay.
What distinguishes our board and train programs and daycare and train programs is that I film the first lesson of everything. Okay. And I compile it into one video. So the first week video is always the longest, anywhere between 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
And I cover everything in a board and train or daycare and train. We cover sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. So you get more obedience than you would than in person.
Sure.
Because in the in person, I have to teach you how to train your dog.
Sure.
Right? So we're going to cover less. Whereas with the board and train, I already know how to do that. I do it for you, and I send you the video, and you use that to learn what your dog has learned. Okay?
Okay.
So typically what people do is they'll do the board and train or daycare and train. They'll get their video. They'll start practicing stuff as they learn things. And then you get follow-up lessons, okay, that are one-on-one.
Okay.
So if something is not clicking from the video, from the board and train or whatever, you can book a follow-up and go, hey, we're not understanding the recall. We're struggling. I go, okay, we'll cover it. And I help you review the recall. Let's say everything in the videos transfer over and you're like, hey, it makes total sense. She's doing great. I go, awesome. But then we can't cover the toddler thing in a board and train. You could use a follow-up for the toddler thing. Okay. Okay. The follow-ups are just there. Okay. And sometimes things happen.
And follow-ups are part of the like board and train or okay.
And it's on the website as well.
Okay.
So Tina would send that information. So you'll see like 1 week board and train, what you get with it. Okay. 2 week, what you get with it, so on and so forth. Okay. For the board and trains, the longer we have the dog, the closer I get them towards off-leash reliability. Okay. Your case seems pretty simple in terms of what you're needing.
Sure.
So chances are a board and train is going to get much more than you would actively use in your daily life with her.
Sure.
But it's more so convenience-wise. If you think trying to make time to reinforce everything might be difficult, then board or daycare trains are nice for that. And this is easy enough where you could do that. Okay.
And during those, you would be with other animals, so she would.
Yeah, so she'd be here at our facility. Sorry, I got my next client here. Just let him in real quick. She'd be here at my facility. Hey, Adam. Hey, I'm just wrapping up with another consult, but you can come on in. You come inside. So we got a dog coming if you want to shorten your leash.
Okay, yeah, I got a short leash.
You're good. Excellent.
That's
if you'd like, you can sit on the blue chairs over there. Sure. Okay. I'm sorry, question? You said she'd be here with other dogs?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
She would be getting some of that interaction, like
Yeah.
that you would be at a park or wherever.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times when we get reactive dogs, we don't see it here, which again, it doesn't impede the training. And if like the owner picks up the dog and they're still struggling with reactivity for whatever reason, they can use the follow-up to help address that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I would say for you, because off-leash stuff really isn't, or like the full scope of training doesn't seem like a super important thing, you should be fine with a 1 week. Okay.
Okay.
And the video is just super long. If you did a 2 week, the second week I'm really just pressing her more in terms of the level of obedience.
Okay.
That video is much shorter. It's usually about 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
But then also if the owner cares about socialization, like with other dogs, that starts on the second week. Okay. So the first week, the dog is under a lot of stress because of all the training and the foreign environment, that we give them a week to acclimate. And then by the second week, they're usually over everything, that we can start trying to socialize them with other dogs and stuff like that. Okay. Okay. So if that's something you care about, then you'd want to do a longer one. Okay. Sure. Otherwise, in the 6th class program, technically speaking, I could also show you how to socialize her correctly with other dogs. Okay. Now this pertains to dogs she would see regularly. Okay.
Okay.
So like a friend's
not
dog,
just like
not the random dog.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the way I explain to people is, we don't typically like talk to people randomly unless it's for directions or something.
Yeah.
We don't really talk to random people, right? But for some reason with dogs, it's kind of like expected that they like socialize with the random dog.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So realistically speaking, I don't care about the random dogs. She should not be reactive though.
Okay.
Okay. When it comes to like the dog park setting and all that, if she wanted to be social, she would leave you. And just so that you're aware, the reason why you see reactivity on the leash but not off the leash is because on the leash she's unable to run away from the situation.
Sure. Yeah. She's trapped. We've also had one incident where a dog came over to our house and it was like eating out of her food bowl, and that really upset her.
Oh, really? Yeah, so that'd be territorial.
Yeah.
Now, that's technically something we could also cover.
Hey, there you go.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it. It just depends on how much you want to get done, right? And what you prioritize. So if you're like, sorry, busy. If you decide for like the 6th class, you're like, yeah, I'd like to learn how to socialize with people, or I'd like to have like my friend with their dog come over. You know, that's something we could technically cover.
Okay.
Okay. I would say it doesn't seem like too much of a stretch to get it done within the 6 classes.
Okay.
But definitely, like the more things you want to accomplish, that's where the longer programs start to come into play.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, so between like the board or the like daycare one and the 6 classes, do you have a recommendation as far as like if we were to do one of the board or
Sure.
daycare one, and then we could add on a class if we needed to?
You could, yeah.
Okay.
So in person, you learn more.
Okay.
Okay. Yourself, because you're
Yeah.
training the dog. The con is we cover less.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
The board and
Okay.
train, we cover more,
Sure.
but you experience less.
Less.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's a trade-off.
Okay.
Okay. But your dog can do either. I get some dogs where I tell the owner, you have to do this yourself.
Okay.
Because you need to learn how to live with this dog. I already know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So it really comes down to like, we have a client who's going out of town, and I suggested in person, but they could technically do board and train, and it just happened to work.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, well, I'll board my, maybe boarding my dog.
Yeah, we're gonna board it anyway.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, perfectly fine. So mull it over.
Okay.
There's no rush to decide or what have you.
Sure.
Okay. Tina will send you the options.
Okay.
And then pricing's on my website. She should also send pricing as well. And if you have any questions you may have forgotten to ask,
Okay.
you can just reach out to her.
The only other question is, so you said, so all the training right now in the summer is at Oz Park?
Yes.
Is that
Now, if
correct?
you'd like to meet here,
Okay.
you can. It would just be my availability is going to be limited.
Okay.
Because now I'm mostly at the park.
Okay.
Whereas during the winter, snowy
Mostly
times,
here,
I'm
yeah.
here.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. But that's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay. If that's a preference for you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Not right now.
Okay.
I feel
Well, it's a
like
pleasure
we've
meeting
covered
you.
a lot. Yeah.
Nothing that I have not seen before, so I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Come on.
And if you
Let's
forgot
go.
to ask anything,